ahead, start again.
No, you're good.
Okay. Special exception request.
All right, we'll start with Derek since he's here. So he is wanting to put a cell tower up on Abernathy's property, which is off of Peachy Road on 550, I believe is the actual road that it's off of.
I think it's 500.
500?
Yeah.
So the information was sent to you in the packet, but I will turn it over to him so he can, if you need to ask him any questions on that or whatever, that you guys have for him. And if you didn't look at it in the packet, I do have some information here.
It looks tall.
I'm sorry?
I said it looks tall.
Would you like to hear from me at this point?
Sure.
Okay. My name is Derek Brew. I'm here representing a company called Iron Mountain Towers, who is looking to propose, we're proposing a communications tower, a guided communications tower, as Becky said, on 500 North. So the nice part about its placement is it's far away from it. There's no homes within many hundreds of feet where, you know, or sometimes I have to put towers right next to homes or near homes, and I get a crowded room. This is exactly what I want to see. This is perfect. This is perfect. We do have legal access down that road. We've determined that. We have acquired our FAA approval. We leased the property from the Abernathys. The reason in the tower's guide is because essentially you go over 250 feet with a tower and it becomes cost prohibitive to build a self-supporting tower that's over 250 feet. That's kind of the rule of thumb across the board. I'm not saying there's no towers that are three-legged towers over that, but generally speaking, no one builds self-supporting towers over 250 feet. We meet all the setbacks. The tower will meet all ANSI, TIA 222 standards, which is basically the federal structural requirements for ice and wind. As I mentioned, there's really no homes for hundreds and hundreds of feet. We will run power and I believe we'll run fiber to the site as well. There's no wetlands being affected. There's no protected species being affected by our tower. We'll, abide by all building requirements when we apply, if and when we apply for a building permit. The tower will not be painted. The FAA now these days gives us an option to either paint the tower aviation orange and white, which is looks like a candy cane, or you can do what's called a medium dual lighting system up to 500 foot of a tower. This is only 440 or 440 or 450, but the option that we chose and almost everybody chooses is to not paint the tower, so it stays just like a steel gray. And then what we do is we light the tower with a white light during the day and red at night. If and when we get special exception approval, we'll continue our due diligence period, which requires a lot of federal environmental permitting. And we would then file for a building permit and then start construction once the customer's ready. I have heard have you heard any complaints or concerns about the tower from anyone?
This is just the first year.
I just mean from neighbors or?
No.
Okay. So, like I said, this is what I want to see. So with that, I'll take any questions you have for me.
If you're given all the permits, when would it happen?
This is July. Probably, it could happen just before, like the end of fall. Mm-hmm. But I would say likely early next year.
And do you already have a customer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't do that anymore. And years ago, people used to do that. I used to be one of them, where we build towers or develop towers without customers, but no one does that anymore. It's not a sound investment. And it used to be you could guess where customers wanted towers. You can't do that anymore. you just can't guess anymore.
And how tall is the tower?
I believe it's 440.
And what is our, what do we allow?
200.
So we're asking for 240 foot.
I don't recall there being a height restriction. Is that there? I don't remember even any ordinance or anything requiring setbacks or height restrictions. I went through your ordinance backwards and forwards. You found something that said
I don't know if you remember it, but is it specifically in a district that says 200 feet?
I can't remember, but I know that there's language.
It's 200 feet, yeah, and I would have to go back and find it again. It might be listed underneath one of the zoning areas,
Okay.
specific zoning area.
okay.
And I'm not honestly 100% sure what that is zoned out there. My guess would probably be the ag.
It's ag. Yeah.
So,
So I don't think there's a height restriction. That's just my opinion. At least I did all kinds of research for your tower regulations. I didn't find any. Now, what I did supply you with to show the need for that height is what we're going to call signal maps. And so the customer that's looking to use the tower has provided, and I'm not looking at it, but I can bring it up. Signal maps, which is showing the signal. They're sending a point-to-point signal many miles to the east and west. So it maybe 15 to 30 to 45 miles that they're sending the signal, that you just happen to be in an area where your elevation is, maybe you know this or maybe you don't, but Fremont's, I guess, at a very high elevation. And so that's why they sought out this area. Is because of the elevation of the ground. But they still need, a 200-foot tower would not serve their need at all. It wouldn't even come close to serving their need. So that's the reason why we're asking for that.
So you're obviously familiar with the area. There's a tower that's due south of town that you see when you go south of town. Do you know how tall that is?
I believe that's about the same height.
I would agree, but I don't know. How tall is that?
I think that one's.
That's on Ruby's
You mean Wallace's?
or Watson.
Yeah, I think that's 300.
Okay.
So
Swider's Tower is right at 200.
And I thought we gave them a
Because
special
we did have to give
We have to get a special exception to get
But
that other
I
300.
think that the language is in there is because that was in the town limits, in the corporation limits. I don't think that there's any language for anything that's in the extraterritorial area. That would be up to the county. That would be language that would be in the county's building codes, I would think.
Right.
It would be more up to the FAA, be up to the FAA.
Well, I agree with that, yeah.
Over anybody.
Sure.
We have our FAA approval. I submitted it with the application. To answer your question about that tower, this technology is very, like I do a lot of work for Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and when I do that, our search areas, what we're called our search areas, are circular generally. They say, we need a tower, you need latitude, longitude, they say within typically about half a mile. And this technology is very different. The search area is rectangular and long. And so the problem, if that tower was in line, if it was further north, it would work. But where it sits now, it's not even close to being where it
Well, I'm
is.
not arguing with you about the height.
No,
I know there's language in there about towers, and I know there's something about 200 feet, but I think that it's because it's in the corporation limits. Is why that 200-foot limit was put on.
Okay.
We have a tower company here in town that's been here forever.
Yeah, I know.
You know, yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with
Yeah.
it. And they have a small tower out there.
Yep.
By their facility,
I put T-Mobile on it.
okay?
Yeah.
So, and they wanted to add to it probably when you put T-Mobile on it.
Yep.
And we give them a very special exception so they could.
Right. They're going to put Verizon up above T-Mobile.
Yeah. So I don't think that there's anything in there that limits what he wants to do as far as outside in the 2 mile radius. But I think that we need to do a little bit more due diligence on what it is. Whether there is anything or whether there isn't anything.
That would not be covered under any of these other permits?
Well, I don't know. I'm just saying, I think that there needs to be checking. I don't have a problem with it. But by the same token, I don't want to do something that we're not supposed to do and get in trouble, right?
What's your sense of adventure?
Yeah, well, you know, my sense of adventure's gone.
So then, are you thinking we should table it, do a little more research, then have a special
Well, I would just make sure that there
There's a
isn't.
contingent on
Yeah,
getting that solved.
yeah. I would just make sure that there isn't anything in there. I don't think there is.
And would that be from the county, Steve?
Well, I don't know. I can't answer that question. That's what I'm saying. I'm not 100% sure. I know that we have something. I don't exactly remember what the language is.
And what there is beyond?
Yes, I don't,
Understand?
that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like I say, I have no problem with him putting up whatever, I don't care if he wants to put 1,000 footer out there, don't make no difference to me.
That takes a big one.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it either, just if we can check that.
So, but I need to have something.
So do we want to make a motion to approve it contingent upon review
Of ordinances.
Okay,
so I make a motion to approve it contingent upon review
all right.
of ordinances to ensure no violations will occur.
And there's a second,
I'll second.
whatever she said.
Got it.
Seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Pass.
And I would say, you know, if you can bring us something, obviously you've done your research. If you can bring her something, I have no problem with you know,
Okay,
producing whatever we need.
okay.
That's not the problem. I just want to make sure that we don't tell you, yeah, and then you get 3/4 of the way through the process.
Yeah. So what will happen from here? Do you need me to provide you something or?
Well, I think you need to work with
Okay.
Becky.
Okay. And so Becky will have the authority to give me the approval if we, between us, determine that there's no height restriction?
Yes.
Okay. And then if there is a height restriction, what would we do?
Then you'd have to go through the BZA and get a special exception.
Okay. I just did a word search in your ordinance and I didn't find anything
Okay.
with 200. I just did
Okay.
search for 200. and
I know that there's some
And that may be
weird
the
rules,
case.
but the county's got a lot of stuff in there, so.
Oh yeah, but we wouldn't follow the county, right? We'd follow
Well,
yours.
you kind of got to, you kind of have to.
How do I follow both?
Well, I
don't think they would follow it for the zoning because we control the zoning, but
Okay.
they would for the building permit regardless.
and it
Yeah.
could be
Yeah.
in there.
And their building permit.
Okay, well, their building permit won't have a height restriction, but their zoning would. But you're saying,
I wouldn't be too sure about that because they have a height restriction on houses and it's in the building stuff.
right, but they have a wireless ordinance that is pretty well written, I'll put it that way.
Okay.
And so
More specific.
that's where, but I'll look, I have no problem.
I take your word for it. I know that the other permitting process through the FAA and everything is very thorough and,
Yeah,
like I say, I've been around this fire bush for a long time. I know what it takes to get a tower built, so. Some of this is very ridiculous, I know.
no, it's okay.
Well, I mean, some of the other stuff that you have to do is pretty
Oh, yeah.
over the top.
I'll tell you the most ridiculous one. We had a site in Elgin, Illinois, I was building for T-Mobile, and it had all kinds of environmental issues with it. And there's a part of it I'm missing, but the funniest part was that, well, sometimes if you affect a tribe,
Yeah.
you end up having to pay the tribe who will send a member out, and you have to pay him to watch and make sure you are not unearthing any artifacts. And you have to pay him, and he just basically sits there in his pickup truck and smokes. That's all. That's all.
I know.
That's all that really
That's
happens.
exactly what I was talking about.
Okay. So,
It's like, where can you get that job?
You don't find any arrowheads out there. There's a lot of them around.
but there's the same site had an endangered turtle that was on the swamp on both sides of the property. And so we were required to put danger turtle crossing signs all over the property. And we were not allowed to drive a truck to the tower site where we were constructing without a person walking in front of the truck to make sure they don't run over a turtle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have bats.
Oh yeah, any other bat or ground
Out
bat.
there in the cemetery lake, there's a frog or a salamander or something out there that's protected. The Masaga rattlesnakes out in there, and that's
Mhm.
protected. So, yeah, you're not out of the woods yet.
Thanks for coming now.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna go fight that.
Any
white
other
truck.
discussion?
Becky, do you have other exemptions?
Yeah, so the other one was the McNaughton pool. The picture was in there, he wants to put an in-ground pool in the backyard of his property, which, based upon this, it looks like he's only
Thank you.
less than 5 feet from the property line, and then only 4 feet from his house.
And this might be one that actually needs to go through the BZA because a variance really needs to be, I don't know if we can grant a special exception for that because of a setback that's.
I don't think you should for him.
Okay, you can't base it on the person.
I'm not basing it on the person, but I am basing it on the attorney.
Well, I think that just because it's set so close to the house and it's within, and it is in ground, it's not like a shed, it's 30, normally you would have a 30-foot setback, or 10% of the lot width if it's on the side, so I think it should probably go before the BZA myself.
I would disagree. I think that, yeah.
Can we send it to the BZA with no recommendation,
Mm-hmm.
with a negative recommendation?
No, it actually just, I think it is just a BZA,
Yeah,
just because of the setbacks.
he needs a variance, he doesn't need a special exception.
Right, that's what.
So, we've been talking about in-ground pools before, do we have requirements then to have like a certain amount of space around the pool or?
Well, there are requirements that the county has, as far as like fencing, if it's
Yes.
if it's, even if it's above ground, if it's more than 36 inches, it has to be fenced in, so there are requirements, and I believe that his yard's fenced in anyway. But
Well, I
the
think
setbacks,
there's some stuff in ours about in the fencing. thing.
yeah, but it
If it's
would,
an in-ground pool, it's gotta have a fence around
yeah, and
Around
it
the
would,
pool or around just the backyard?
it, around the pool.
yeah, so no one can get into it, if it's in ground, it does have to have a fence, which again, he has that, but it's a matter of, it's too close to the house and,
Yeah, he's got
4
two
foot
others
is too close to the
there.
house and 5 foot is too close to the edge, without a variance. Because it's not movable, it becomes permanent, like with an above ground pool, you can tear it down, and move it. This isn't gonna be there for good.
Do we need to make a motion for that or just send it on?
No, I think that it can just, Becky can just get a hold of him and let him know that we have to go through the BZA. Because there are different requirements, there's advertising requirements and things that they have to do.
I was approached by Cynthia Church, who promised land, the business that they run for the special needs. They run it right now out of the outlet mall, one of the offices there, and they're contemplating buying their son's property, who lives right down here on 120 and what is the road?
Going into Briarwood, I don't know the name of the road,
Yes.
I'm sure with that.
It's kind of like across from Baker's.
Briarwood Road.
Yeah.
Okay, so he lives on the corner there, and his house is for sale because he's gonna be moving, but, so his house sits
One
on,
of the cows?
his house sits on a parcel. Then beside it is another parcel up against the road, and then behind them is a large parcel of ag, or whatever you wanna call it. I believe it's all zoned. The back is ag, and I believe the front two are residential, if I remember correctly, but she was wanting to buy that all and she wants to rezone not the house one, the one beside it up against 120 in the corner. She wanted to run her business out of it. So, do we need to rezone it to, could we rezone it to B1? If that's what we want to do. And then allow them to build, more than likely, their business there, which I'm guessing would be more like a pole barn structure, would be what they would build for their business. And then they would rent the house, what?
And house animals?
Well, she said maybe goats or rabbits for therapy. But she did not mention cows or anything like big like that. So, which I sent her the ordinance with the animals, saying that you would not be able to have the larger, and it doesn't specifically mention the smaller breeds, it just says livestock. So I guess we would have to look in our definitions and find out exactly what livestock it means or what.
Anything bigger than a rabbit is livestock.
So that is what I sent her. So she has that information, but I told her as far as getting it rezoned and allowing her to run a business out of that, would have to come before you guys first.
Now,
So.
there's two houses right beside each other there. What about the other people who live in the other house?
What
Do they have any objections
Well,
to that?
Well, nothing's been advertised or anything
Yeah,
yet
if you get a
because
rezone, you have to advertise it, so
Okay.
whether or not
Okay.
you approach them or not.
So-
she was just wanting to know if there was a possibility. If the answer is absolutely no, we're not gonna allow that, then there would be no need for her to do all the advertising and go to all the extra work and spend the money for nothing.
Dipping her toe in the water and asking us what we think.
Correct.
So, that corner right there that she would be building whatever on, that is within the 2-mile limit, right?
Correct.
And it has the mailboxes for all the houses in that private community right there.
Correct.
And if she's running a business out there, where are they gonna park?
Oh, and
How are they
also,
gonna get in and out?
yeah, she wants her driveway to go off the county road and not 120,
It's not a county.
It's
road.
not a
or whatever that road is. She wants it to go off of there.
Association.
It's a private road.
Yeah.
So that was her first thing, because she does not want to mess with the traffic on 120.
Yeah.
And then second thing, she acted like there wouldn't be a whole lot of parking. So I don't know how many people work there that would actually, because obviously their clients don't
Yeah,
drive.
if it's considered a business,
However.
they're required to have certain
Correct.
amount of parking. So
Correct.
regardless of how many they actually have, it still has to be provided in their plans.
So is she talking about combining the second parcel, which is empty, and the third parcel, which is large?
She didn't act like
Back
she was
there?
combining anything.
Or just building her business on the one parcel?
So there's that going west, that is in the plans with the comprehensive plan to go west. As far as development goes, on the front side of the road, that 120 would be business. One of the things that you do have to be cautious on is that you're not spot zoning, so, that, again, that is in the plan to be comprehensive. I don't know how putting the driveway off that private lane would work,
You
that,
can't, none of us can grant her.
yeah, that would have to really come off the state. And then again, she'd have to meet the parking requirements, just like anybody else who were putting in a business, regardless. And should be no animals out there, because the current ones are in violation as it is, because, you can't put animals in after there's a residence within 400 feet. So,
What are the specifics on deceleration warnings?
Oh, well, that would, she'd have to have 2,000 feet, 2,000 foot of decel lane, because that's 50 miles an hour out there. But here's the thing, there's no businesses on that side of the road.
that's true. Yeah, that is true.
And just because there's businesses on the north side of the road, doesn't mean that you can put businesses on the south side of the road, doesn't mean you can put businesses on the north side of the road, because that would constitute spot zoning in a residential area.
Sure.
And the way I read it, but I may be wrong.
Well,
Because everything is residential on that side.
But didn't he have cows back in there?
And that he's not supposed to have
Yeah.
cars back there.
Oh,
they
he
have
didn't
cows
post it?
right now.
There are
they've
cars
got
there,
pigs.
but not supposed to be.
They have pigs.
Then we went through all this on when they wanted storage sheds. About them using the drive. How long ago? Remember the
What's
storage sheds?
Yeah,
some guy wanted to put storage sheds in that property and go
Oh,
down.
yeah, that was approved, we approved that.
Then,
No,
Is that the one by
no,
your
there's a
house?
guy that wanted to put storage sheds.
Oh, right there on that property, he wanted to put a temporary sales lot there with the,
Yeah.
with the sheds, correct, yeah, I thought you meant the other than those down the road.
Yes. No.
So my other question for it is technically a private community and supposedly they have an HOA or whatever it
No,
is.
they don't have anything.
Well, if it is there a perception that the community would have to approve that because is that lot part of that community?
Well, any
Or is it-
adjoining
If the
landowner
lot-
would have to,
if
would
the-
have to approve.
Yeah, because there would be a public hearing if that was gonna be rezoned, so they'd have to have a public hearing, so everyone would get the opportunity to, whoever attended, of course,
They would be connected to our sewer.
they'd have to connect to our sewer on that front lot,
Would
anybody
that-
that builds out there.
Well,
Would
just
that
sewer,
put
not
us
water.
under the liability for the beginning of that driveway? If we granted them business
For the beginning of the driveway.
from
the-
120
The entry.
back in
Well,
Briarwood?
depends on who's.
No, we would just be connecting that lot, as far as to the sewer.
Well, I was afraid that we gave them like a B1 zoning for that.
Well, I think that driveway, if you look on GIS, that driveway is a separate chunk of ground where that road is.
Okay.
I think.
Are you meaning because we're approving a business there, are we then responsible to make sure people can enter and
For
exit
years, we
and meet
haven't,
those business parking?
we haven't annexed that
Mhm.
because of the road situation. Not wanting to spend millions and millions and millions to put water, sewer, curbs, pave back through there. I don't want to see us, I'm afraid, changing it through a variance or something would be the way to do it, but change the whole zoning for that. I'm afraid that's gonna open the door for us to be liable to take that over. The
That whole
upkeep,
neighborhood back
maintenance,
there.
and everything.
I don't think.
Yeah, it should, we would just like sometimes, for instance, when you, annex, you just annex, the road itself, and you don't get that, so we wouldn't be annexing that property. We would just be, doing a rezone on it. But, and running the sewer wouldn't change that obligation, it's just that anybody that runs on 120 has to connect to our sewer. If they're in the backside of it, they do not.
I think that one should be another one to go to the BZA and go for a special exception instead of a rezone.
Well,
I don't think that you can do
BZA
it.
can't
No,
do
you
that.
can't give something like that a special exception.
No, it's either you.
It has to be rezoned,
Yeah.
and you can't rezone it because it would constitute spot zoning, in my estimation.
Since it's on that side of the road.
Yes.
Well, there's no room for expansion for other businesses there, so it would just be one lone business.
Yeah, but what if they, wanna do something down by Van Gilder? Somebody else? That ever gonna spot zone that?
Well, actually, there is a spot, that's one of the things that we ran into, is there are spots on that side down by Van Gilder, that area is spot zone. You've got the property on the corner that's
Yeah.
not, and then the other. Well, we've been told, so now that we know that, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, we were told you can't do spot zoning, so,
So
you
that's.
can't start it up after you've already been
Yeah,
told.
that's one of
You
my
can't do it.
concerns, if we do it for them, then is it gonna, are other places gonna pop up that want this spot
Right,
zoning too?
right.
Well, it's, so you can't do it anymore. It's all spot zone all the way out through there. You've got May Motors, you've got, the
Storage
whatever,
units.
Callaway's thing that was across the road that we let him do that, and then you have,
Storage units, the
technically you got
sheds.
Timbuktu's and you got Jerry's thing down there, and yeah, it's a mess all the way out through there. But that was before they told you that you couldn't do that. Now you can't do it. So.
I guess I would say to her or them that it would be spot zoning, I would agree with them that it is inadvisable
So, I know she's gonna ask, so I'm just gonna ask now while I'm here. What about if it's, since it's zoned residential, what about an in-home business? Technically, it's not attached to the home.
That's true.
Because I think it,
Well, I just wanna cover all my bases, because she's gonna
And-
ask.
The rule for an in-home business is if you don't cause a disturbance to the neighbors. So if she's gonna have a tremendous amount of traffic in and out of there, then the answer would be no.
In the existing home, because she could
Sure.
build something.
Yeah.
An
that's what I'm
in-home
saying,
business, an
somebody
in-home
did have a
business,
beauty shop out there.
what I consider an in-home business is somebody that is, maybe, I don't know, doing woodworking.
Or cutting hair,
Cutting
or
hair, 'cause I
doing
think
crafting.
Something you
yes,
don't create a
exactly.
lot of traffic.
Right,
Because the thing is if she says it's an in-home business, but they build a building over there, the amount of people trying to turn left and right into a parking lot is gonna cause a huge problem out there.
Yeah, you could, I don't think.
There's
you could build another
semis,
road.
there's that semi business in that neighborhood, it would not,
because she already brought that up too and asked, there's a business back there, and I'm like, okay. I'm not doubting anything, I just,
Right.
I'm gonna come and ask, and I'll give you the answer of what is said, because I can't make that decision on my own. Oh, okay.
so I would
So
say.
that's, rezone is more than
I would
likely
say
not
we're-
happening, because we can't spot zone, so that's where we're stuck on that.
To do that.
Yeah. So she probably can't do it. It's stuck as a home. Just so I know. I don't, because I know she's gonna start asking questions, and I don't wanna tell
And
her.
I
she's
think
gonna
the
leave.
answer for her question is that those other places were grandfathered in when
Right.
this ordinance came to be.
The angle with the in-home business, I think that was generally believed to be you were going to live there.
Mhm.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. Because originally she'd made a comment too about using that house, but I don't think the house is set up maybe the way, like they want the larger rooms or whatever, so the house itself is not adequate to run the business out of. So then that's what she said, could I build a building, could I get that rezoned, could I run the business, then it kept going, and I'm like, so that's where we're at.
Well, I'd much rather see that there than a bunch of cows.
I agree, and he's moving, so that's gonna be gone, but still, or is planning on moving. If he
I
hasn't
good
already.
when our inspectors go work. There's no biggest violators that there is, and boy, I tell you what, I tell him about every time I see him. He never writes me up. Goddamn stupid county inspector.
I would just say to her that we don't see how that would be feasible, either as an in-home business or as rezoned.
Perfect, I will tell her. The only other thing that I had was, if you had any questions, Barry was buying a,
I bought, where my brother lives, when my grandparents used to live there, that yellow house.
in the
Okay,
little triangle
just south
corner,
of that, where
Broad
Broad
Way.
Street comes out and curves around and meets King 27. I bought those lots from Swigers. And I've inquired about, I want to put a pole barn style, or a garage. I'm looking at, because of what's buried in there, I'm looking at something that doesn't have to go down into the ground other than anchors, so I'm looking at like a carport with sides and doors. There's a small version out here they ordered, that white one that they've got looks like a 2-car garage. Something similar to that, I'm looking at like 30 feet wide, 50 feet long, 12 foot to the eaves, be all steel construction, 2 roll-up doors, an entry door, and like those lots are longer this way than they are here. Like Broad Street runs here. I'm gonna position it in here with the doors on this end. They'd be facing the west. And we run a tape measure up there when we were doing starting to do do some cleanup up there. And without, after measuring the setbacks and everything, I've still got like, I can do almost a 60 by 80 building there. But I'm only looking at 30 by 50.
Because with there being 3 roads there, you have to be 25 feet back from the road right of way. So there, I think there's a bigger setback on State Road 120. And then of course you have the other, it kind of curves around there, but you'd have to stay 25 feet back all the way around on that side. The other thing, I'm just throwing it out here so everyone's aware of it, full disclosure, is that we normally don't allow that kind of thing. Because we require 1,000 square feet of living space, in there, so, just so you know. But with this not being permanent, because it sounds like it's not permanent,
Yes.
so it would be different than if it's in the ground, you know.
As a foundation versus not.
This will be,
Yeah,
it may end up with concrete. But right now, I'm looking at having it built and they put screw anchors down in the ground to secure it. Kind of like what they do on the wall.
And what's the usage?
I want to put my boat in my trailer. At
So
my
for
house,
storage.
in my house, I used to have a strip behind me, between me and McNaughton's building. Well, it's come to light that John and Joyce, when they owned the whole house to the north of me, they had a driveway in there, and they had that alley that was in there closed. It was given to them as property owners. Every time that property was surveyed, I'd see these survey stakes back here. It was believed that's mine here, this is the alley, half of that's mine. So I could back my vehicles up into there, park in there. Mr. Musson pointed out to me that he owns that. And he told me where my tulip tree is, it's about that big around. He put a stake in the ground about that far to the east of my tulip tree. Said he was gonna cut down the pine tree and that wild cherry tree, and if this tulip tree interfered, he was gonna take it down too. And I looked at him and I said, how do you propose you're gonna do that? He says, I own this, I pay taxes on it. I said, yes, sir. I says, I'm glad to know that. I says, however, I've maintained this property for over 35 years and I can prove it. I said, you want to go to court? But I don't have that strip to park on anymore. So if I can't put a building, that's fine. My trailers are going to sit on there, exposed. Because I can't keep asking my brother to park them at his place. And I don't have any place else.
So is it one parcel that you?
There's actually 3 lots there.
Yeah.
It's 0.43 acres. But they're from the original plot. So the lots are 66 wide, 124 long.
That don't meet current standards, right?
But that's the way they were
That's what
Originally planned.
originally.
Yeah.
And then the southernmost lot,
66 by 132 was a standard lot here too.
the southernmost lot, when the state came through and redid 827, they clipped a corner off of it. This lot was in here this way. They chopped a big chunk off of it and went up where that ditch, the drainage ditch is, and then you've got the hill and the poles. The property line runs right about where those guy wires are, is the state's property. And they are going to have to maintain that because I've tried to mow it, and my mower won't hang on that hill. what's,
Staying gonna maintain, I'll say that. I already had that conversation with them 3 years ago, so.
oh, yeah, about the fence and that stuff. So that's what we were thinking.
Is there a problem with that kind of temporary building spanning multiple lots?
We would require all the lots, we would require it to be surveyed into one parcel, because that's what we've done with other people. We'd have to do that, I mean, you'd have to get it resurveyed in order to do it, to, you know, have it be merged. Yeah.
Well, you'd have to, I mean, I think that you have to, if you're gonna allow them to do it, you have to have a variance. And I don't know what the county will say about that big of a building being on that kind of a foundation. I suppose, you know, as long as you have the engineering on it, they would probably okay it, but I don't know. I mean, I understand the smaller buildings, you know, they've done those for years, but that's getting pretty damn big
Yeah,
to be on it, to be on ours,
it's
right? So,
about the size of the inside of this room,
how big did you say you wanted it?
30 by 50.
Oh, I think you said, well, it's bigger than this, it's about almost double the length of this. And it'd be this wide. It's a big building.
So you measure from the setback,
I went from that pole there on
the electrical,
off of Broad Street where that big pole is.
Mhm.
You said 25 feet off of that pole. So I come back 25 feet off of that pole and do an imaginary line. And I measured over till I was like 40 feet from the guy wire. And it's, like I said, there's at least 80 feet in
and
there.
then it still gives you 25 feet, at least 25 feet to the road right away on 120.
Or 827.
Or
On
827, I'm sorry,
827?
yeah, 827, I'm sorry, yeah.
I don't know where the right of way is. I measured, it's got, I went from the property line on that side in 40 feet is where I drew my other line, imaginary. So I'm 40 feet away from the state's property, which would be 60 some feet away from the road.
So if you're 60 feet from the road, you should be, well, within 25 feet from the right of way, I would think.
State is.
Because what are their,
Is the state 66 feet?
66 feet, but then there's, a lot of times there's another 30 to 40 feet beyond that. 66 foot is roadway, 66 foot is side, I believe is what
I
they're.
thought it was from the center, 33
That's
feet.
driving width. Or road width, but then they normally have more than that, so.
yeah, 'cause I thought the state was more than what we were.
They are.
Ours is.
And that's what ours is 66. Pretty sure.
Oh, for the road, yeah, but I meant like your setback. I thought that
It
the
is.
state has a bigger,
Yeah.
a little larger setback than what we require.
Well, they really don't have any unless they went through and bought it, or somebody else bought it for them.
So you're in the inquiry phase, but like,
I bought the ground.
okay,
And it was the other thing that I thought about doing is putting my brother's name, since he owns everything south or north of it, put it on his so that it would be like another building on his property.
That, you can do that, but I think that I just think that if you're gonna build a building on a separate parcel of property, the way that we've been doing things for the last 20 years, I think that you need to go through the BZA and either get a variance or development exemption. That's just my opinion, especially for what you are right
Mhm.
If I was doing the same thing and I was still doing what I did for a long time, I would go through the channels and either get a variance or a special exception. So that everybody knew what I was doing before I did it.
Yeah, not
You know what I mean?
anything, I want.
But that would simplify it very, you know, that would make it very simple if you incorporated that whole piece of property and then put your building on it, that would be not a problem. Because it would be on a piece of property that had a house on it, basically. And that's what the biggest reason that we did that years ago was because of those 2 or 3 garages that we had down there by the church. Down here, Michael's, remember?
On,
Because we were having trouble.
on the corner of Michael Street out there, how'd they get that garage up there?
He
They-
had to be surveyed to include the house,
Yeah, it's all on one piece of property.
yeah, because that's the only way you could do it without the 1,000 square feet.
We made Chad Walter do the same thing when he built that garage down there in his house. We made him put all that property together, resurvey it. So, that's just how we did things. So, and that's basically,
Because to build a structure, you're required to have 1,000 square feet of living space in it.
Yes.
Otherwise, we have storage buildings everywhere, and so then that was one of the reasons why we did that. And then, so in order for them to do that, then they surveyed it all into one parcel, and then they were able to build their structure. They would not be able to re-separate it then later, you know, they'll have to sell it as one.
as one piece.
I'd say that's your best plan of action.
I mean, either or, you know, I can't imagine that anybody's gonna kick too much if you do want, you know, try to get a variance for the building there, but.
You know, buildings that I've been looking
Right.
at, that I've been getting quotes, and they're showing you, you know, $14,000-15,000, and you get your quote, and it's 20,000-25,000.
But if you get an opportunity to like draw tentatively what you're wanting to do, you know, I mean, until you pull the permit, you can keep it that, you know, that way you can see what the setbacks are and, you know, everything. That can be, I mean, it's helpful. I know Becky when she's talking to people to see what they're planning to do.
Because reading I wanted to put, like my pontoon, it's got a storage cover, you go on it, and after I don't care how well you get it on there, post it up and everything. The rains come, the wind comes, next thing you know, you've got crap hanging, the water build up on it, sagging down in. And I want to keep the weather off.
Sure, yeah.
Oh, I don't blame you. I understand completely.
Even if I just do like a carport, you know, something to keep the,
Give it some protection.
yeah.
Anything else, Becky?
That's all that I have for zoning.
Just one quick thing, you also, the comprehensive plan, we will have a meeting on August 7th from 2 to 6, inviting the community, you know, the steering committee, which I know there's a few people that are on that as well. I included, you know, where they're at on that in the packet, so if you had any questions on that, but.
Becky, anything on the trailer?
I sent him a letter.
Okay, and you might also look at number 10 because it looks like it's empty and.
I sent Joe out there to look, and he said there's no tags on any of the other ones, so it's not tagged yet.
Okay. And then, I don't know where this falls, but the people across from the empty lot between Stafford's and Love's, Old Close's house, the people across the street from that empty thing, he's always parking in their yard.
Yeah,
He, she, whatever.
yeah, there's no parking on that side of the road too, so we'll let Joe know on that.
I just noticed that. And
Yeah, 'cause they just
I think
passed.
it just isn't a way for them to mow their yards and
Okay.
I don't know if they complained at all.
No, they have not. They don't complain.
Any other business?
Move we adjourn.
She makes
Second?
second. All in favor, adjournment?
I-
Opposed?